All right. So yeah, as Mr. Chan has said, like your programs are getting a little bit more complicated now, and so maybe you've had some issues where like, oh, I don't know why this is happening. How do I figure out what is actually happening, and how do I fix it? So one good way is called debugging. So first off, what even is a bug? So a bug in a software terms is like something that's like an error or a flaw that's causing your program to behave in unexpected ways. So you think it's moving up, it's actually moving down, or it's something like that. Um, and how did it actually become to? Why is it called a bug? So first, it was actually Thomas Edison who was tinkering around with stuff in his shop, and he mentioned in his notes that he would imagine a tiny bug inside of his device, kind of messing around with things. Um, but it was more widely used after Admiral Grace Hopper, who was one of the first um, computer programmers who worked on the very, very early computers in the 40s and 50s. Um, she found a literal bug, a moth, inside of this huge, like 50-foot by 8-foot computer, and it was causing an issue. And she pulled it out, and she's like the first actual case of a real bug. So after that, it was kind of more popularized. So after that, what is debugging exactly? How do you do debugging? So debugging is the process of inspecting your code, kind of like on a lower level than just viewing the actual stuff that you write and figuring out what is actually going on. So one way is with the temperature conversion. You did console logs, which is kind of useful. If you stick console logs in your code, you can print out values and see when they're happening. Or before, you can even use text, so it prints out on the canvas. But that's pretty tedious. It's kind of slow, and it can often be inaccurate. And as we've seen with some infinite loops, I know I've seen some. Mr. Chan has had an infinite loop. It slows down the whole thing. You can't stop it, even if there's console logs. It just prints a million console logs. So what are some other ways? So Chrome has DevTools, which has a JavaScript debugger inside of it. And to get to it, so you can follow along, kind of encouraged. So an easy way to get to it is you just right-click on the page, and then you select Inspect, and that'll open up this on the right. And the first thing you'll see is just all this crazy stuff here, a lot of colors and everything. And this is the HTML that makes up the whole page. But what we want to do, first off, is because we're using P5.js, that is a whole library that has a bunch of code inside of it. And when we're debugging our code, we don't really care what happens with P5. Like if P5 does a ellipse, we don't really necessarily want to know what that is doing underneath it. We just care if we write an ellipse, that's the end of it. So what we want to do is we want a black box, is what it's called, the P5 libraries. So if you open up the inspector, then you'll see the little 3 arrows in the top right. You go to settings, and we go to black boxing in the settings. And basically we want to add this pattern so that any files that match this pattern name will be blocked. And you'll want to put p5.star.js, and the star means like if it starts with p5 and ends with js, then anything is going to be blocked, which includes p5 DOM, which is important. Otherwise that wouldn't be blocked as well. So once you click add, it'll show up, and that's kind of like a one-time thing. You don't ever need to do it again. That's just kind of set up. So yeah. Is anyone confused on how to do that if they're trying it out? Okay. So next we can actually view the JavaScript. So that's on the Sources tab at the top. And there's a lot of sources on CodePen. 99% of it is not the stuff that you wrote. So to find the actual code that you wrote, it's under, so top should already be expanded, but if you go down, there's going to be CodePen, and then whatever. So I'll show you when we actually do the debugging. I'll have an example, this exact example. Um, but right now, any page you can view sources and pen. And once you find the file that you want, which in our case is called pen.js, you want to basically hide that navigator to give us some more space. So you just click that little icon there, and boom, now we have all this space here. So this is just viewing the code, but right now it doesn't do anything. So kind of the actual features that this gives us over CodePen is we can set breakpoints, and a breakpoint you put on a line by clicking the line number, and it says whenever this line of code is going to be ran, it pauses. So no more JavaScript is going to run, and at this point you can view the variables that are available, and you can step through line by line. So you can actually say only run create canvas, and then only run style value, and then it'll stop after the next line. So to do that, in the top right, I kind of expanded here. You have the first four are the most useful. So resume is the play button, and that will just run the code as normal until it hits another breakpoint. So if let's say you put a breakpoint, 2 breakpoints in a function, you can pause it here, play, and then it'll just jump down to the next one. Step over will run that one line and then jump to the next one. So if you want to run one line at a time, and then also step in, let's say you have your own function that's like, maybe you, in some of the earlier programs, you had a penguin function that drew the penguin face or something. So inside of draw, you could step in to the draw penguin, and then you can see that code. Otherwise, it'll step over. And step out is where it'll run the rest of the function and then stop. So we'll see more of this in action. This is kind of just an overview. So also while it's paused, you can see the values of a variable in real time, which is super, super useful. Instead of console logging it and seeing it after, you just see it right away. So 2 ways is you can either hover over it with the mouse, it'll kind of highlight, and then here it says 0, or there's a column in the right called watch. If you add a watch expression with the variable name, then it'll just always show up. So I would highly recommend using watch expressions here. So let's see. So, and then I ran, in this case I did step over, so it changed the Binos die value to a random number, and it was 0, and now it says 5. So we can see in real time that the value changed to 5. So another useful thing that debugger has is you can run just, you can test out code before you write it into CodePen. So if you press the escape key, it'll open up this console. You might have to click the console tab. And you can see here that I said Binos die value modulus 2, and it printed out the value right away. It didn't have to modify the code, test it out, print it, rerun. It was just right here. And I also purposely added an error to the code, and you can see that. So I've gone around, and sometimes there's been like missing curly braces or missing parentheses, and in that case it'll show up here where you can view that instead of driving yourself crazy trying to find that one missing curly bracket. Now I have found when I was going through this, sometimes this tab pops open, it's called VM, and then some numbers. It usually happens when you try to like step over the last thing in a function. Just basically, if this ever happens, just go back to the pen.js. So all right, let's actually, now that we've had all that, let's actually go through it real time. So if you open up, this is one of the examples from Mr. Chan when we were doing the buttons and checking if the number is odd, printing a square, otherwise a circle. And there was a weird issue where sometimes it would show up, but sometimes not. And so we're going to figure out actually how that happened and why it's happening. So you can click on this. This is the one I used in the slides. So here we have, so the code's over here. And so let's just try it out right now. So we see it's when you press the button odd, it's supposed to show a square when the number is odd. But it's 4, and it's still showing a square. And the circle shows up when it's even. So if we keep pressing it, okay, now the square went away because it's 6, still 6, 2. So when it's odd, the circle goes away, but it's not showing the square. Now it shows the square after. So it's very odd behavior. We're not sure what's going on. So let's jump into the debugger. So if I right-click, inspect. So here you see this what's new. Just go to the console and close it. So like I said, so we're going to go to the little 3 dots, and settings, black boxing. We are going to add a pattern, so p5.star.js. Let's go ahead and add that. Now it shows up, so we're good to go. We can close the settings up here. And alright, so let's go over to the sources tab. And we need to find our code that's usually over here. And to do that, we need to scroll down to this code pen, no domain, pen.js. Anybody need me to back up a step at all? Alright. So we can go ahead and hide the navigator. So here's the same code that we have. See, die value, button, setup is all the same. So this is the right code that we're looking at. So normally what I would do is, so we have this, when it's clicked, something happens. So I would start with putting a breakpoint, the first point that you know something might be going weird. So in this case, it's when you press the mouse. So we have a mouse pressed, and we also have when the button is pressed. So I would put a breakpoint in both of those spots. And if we try it out here, we click the button, boom. So it stopped here, and this is when the button is pressed. So we see the first thing that happens when you click on the button is the button event handler goes. And so, okay, it tries to draw a background. So we can go ahead and step over this line, and it'll just run that one thing. So everything should clear out once you do the background. And there it goes. So that's really cool. We did one line at a time. Now we can check, okay, so it should be printing a rectangle if the value is odd. That's what modulus 2 equals 1 means it's odd. So if we hover over that value right now, we see it's 1. 1 is odd. And while I'm at it, because I don't want to hover over it all the time, I'm going to add a watch, which is already here. So we have die value. We can see the value is 1. If I step over again, we'll see, okay, we went into the if, which means it is odd. We're going to draw the rectangle. Okay, that's good. So it drew it when it was odd. What's happening? Why isn't it working? Let's resume and see what it does next. So next, the canvas mouse event happens, where it's going to redraw the whole thing. So let's see what goes on now. If we step into, we will see it pauses at draw. And okay, so the first thing that goes on there is it changes the value. So right now it's 1. We'll go over, we see it change to 4. All right, we're going to draw some text. Boom, boom, boom. It prints out 4, but the rectangle is still there. Okay, so now it checks if it's even. It is even, and so it's going to draw the ellipse. And then if I play again, it'll So it seems like the issue is it's drawing the rectangle for the previous Venus die value instead of the new one. So there's a few ways that we could do this and fix this. I personally like to have all like the rectangle ellipse stuff inside of the draw function directly instead of in like a click handler. So I'm going to go ahead and try to figure out a way where I can have this rectangle drawn after the value is changed. So I can go over to the CodePen side and make that a bit bigger. So I'm going to add another variable to say if, because we only want it to draw the rectangle if it's odd and the button is pressed. So I'm going to add a variable to check if we should display the rectangle when it's odd. And I'm going to initially set it to false, because when the program first runs, the button's not pressed. And then I'm going to go down here, and instead of wiping the background when the button's pressed, I'm going to, in the draw function, everything related to the canvas is going to go into the draw function. And now what I need is in here, I'm going to say, okay, show odd is equal to true, and I'm going to copy this and say in here, so this is inside the draw, so here we have if the value is even, we can say, now we can say else if Venus die value is odd and we want to show the odd, then we will draw the rectangle, which is here. Okay, so let's see. So when you click it, it says we want to show the odd value. And we know that this happens first, and then it redraws. So let's refresh this and see what happens. So now when you rerun, we'll see that this on the debugger refreshed. And your breakpoints might be on a different line, so you can kind of just rearrange them. So in this case now I want to break inside the draw function to see what's going on. And something else happened. Unexpected end of input. So if you open up the console, that's where the errors are shown. And it says 142. Okay, so something is going on here, but at least we know that there's an error in the code. So I think, oh yes, I forgot to close the if statement. So I can go back, close that, rerun, and now, okay, so it tries to draw, and then we pause. So let's see what the value is right now. So it's 3 right now, so it's odd. So it should not draw the ellipse. and instead it's going to check if the value is odd, and we want to show odd, but show odd is false, so that shouldn't run, which is correct. It did not, and we're going here. So if I press odd now, the value is even, so it should show the ellipse, and then we're done. Let's try again. Value is 5, and I pressed the button, so it should show, and this is correct. It goes in, and there's the rectangle. So I think that there might be an issue still, because if I remove the breakpoint and I click on the outside, I think it's still showing the rectangle for odd numbers, even though I'm not pressing the button. And if I go in, so set another breakpoint. So I see show odd is still true, even though I didn't press the button. And that's because I never set it back to false. So I'm going to go ahead and say show, gotta do it over here, show odd equals false. So every time it draws, it says, even if show odd is true, I'm just going to set it back to false. Refresh. And here we go. So it starts out as 1, and it did not draw it because we didn't press the button. So it's 5, didn't draw the rectangle. So it's not drawing the rectangle when I press the canvas, that's good. I press odd, so it did draw it, and the number is 3. This is correct. And when I click canvas and it's odd, it's not showing it. So I think it's good to go now. So with the use of the debugger, I was able to add watch expressions to see when certain values changed. I was able to put a breakpoint on a certain line so that I can inspect variables at that time. I can step line by line to see how variables change and how things are added onto the canvas. And I can also see when there are errors in the code, like if I have an extra curly brace somewhere. So if I go escape to see the console, I can see again it says unexpected token curly brace. And if I click on here, it brings me exactly to that, to a line. So it sees this one is unexpected, so we see that there's an error. So that's kind of rundown of how to use some of the features of the debugger. I made another code pen here. If you guys want to try out these new features and try to figure out why this one isn't working. It's supposed to draw 10 random circles and squares every other time you click the mouse. So it shows up, goes away, shows up, goes away, shows up. But it should be drawing 10 circles or about 5 circles, 5 squares. But for some reason, it's only drawing 1 circle. So if you guys want to go ahead and try to figure out, using the debugger, why that is happening, then that'll be a good experiment. Get used to it, and of course, help you get used to it so you can use it on your further projects. I can come around and help if you have any questions. Does anyone have any questions right now? Okay. So yeah, give it a shot. Let me know if you fixed it. I'll come around, see, and practice using it on your projects, this project, wherever.